the last question I want to ask on this matter of, Emotive AI is like this particular project you're working on at Timo or Toronto Met or however we're going to call them. It's young. They haven't figured out the nickname yet. And I don't know if you necessarily want to say this in a public venue. How far is it to actionability, and what are your imagined next stages of progress from where you are now to what you can realistically see yourself doing in the next 6 months, a year-ish?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting open questions there. We're operating in a space that's not, again, there's the medical space and there's the wellness space, and they're kind of adjacent, but in the same way, I guess the medical space is beholden to certain kinds of standardizations and norms. Wellness is a kind of a bit more wide open space, but I think the future of this kind of technology, I think, is an integration with things like maybe augmented reality, virtual reality, things like that. We're interested in working on this service as an API, so an application programmable interface. So for example, right, when Uber wants a mapping software, they don't make their own maps, they buy access from Google to the Google map, and they put that in their software, right? And so we're looking at integrating our mental health kind of tracking and monitoring technology as an algorithmic piece of software into other people's applications. So for example, if you have an app you want to start around mental health, we can help you integrate that one piece that takes those biomarkers and gives you an emotional output. And then you integrate that into the games and the interface that you want to build on top of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, that again, it's really good to explain that, because I think those less visible elements of how computer technology functions today is something that I think more people need to really understand, because so much of the development, so much of the public face of technology development is only about the finished products. Exactly. And taking those finished consumer-ready products as completed packages, but not understanding how many other different business contracts and licensing arrangements and other ways of putting the technology in there has been, even just legal ways of putting the technology in there, and legal arrangements and contractual arrangements and business arrangements get all pulled together into a single consumer product that depends on so many other people, right? And it's that background of how every single one of the components might have a company behind it and a business model behind it that is different from the consumer-focused model that we see. And I think that's something that we need to make clear. This is how Silicon Valley types of businesses function. And it's a really different character than all the previous approaches to business we might have put together in other industries in the past. Right?
For sure. And at the same time, there's I think it's both of those. It's kind of it's such a new sort of future capturing industry. And then at the same time, as you said, there's always this kind of underbelly behind it. For example, right, when you use Google Translate, it always gives the effect of it's this AI technology. But at the end of the day, there's people in developing countries being paid fractions of cents a word to audit it. So there's this big kind of underbelly of alienated labor that is driving this magical AI front face, this invisible back end. And even to the example before when we were talking about ChatGPT, I asked it recently, how come you type it so it looks like you're a person typing it? You type it out slowly, as if you could just offer the text instantly. You don't have to make it seem like you're processing the ideas. And it said that was a design feature to make it appear like you're having more of a conversation with a person.
Yeah. And I can see that being a design feature that works well in, say, a lot of its customer service applications, because I know, because as I've looked at different transcription software just to make content for this very venue, right? One of the major corporate applications of chatbots, conversation-based AI, ChatGPT, other applications, is being the front end of customer service lines to weed out those obvious questions and to weed out those obvious situations. Because, and again, if you're a reasonably technologically advanced person and you're listening to this show, most of the problems by the time you call into a call center, this has been my experience because I understand how computers work reasonably well. Most of the time when I have a problem big enough to call a customer service line, it's big enough that I need to escalate it to a senior person right after that initial screening level, right? Because that initial screener is just working through a script for the obvious things.
Yeah, did you plug it in? Did you restart it?
You know, the standard sort of joke about IT's first questions, right? You start the tape rolling, boom. Did you turn it off and on? Is everything plugged in?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, is everything plugged into the right places, right? Do you remember what your password is?
Yeah,
and those, do you
Right.
know how to reset a password? And those kinds of questions, right? And a lot of the sort of labor-saving elements of these applications are about trying to make conversationally reasonable products that can interact with people to solve the simple problems, right? And the issue then becomes, you know, for me personally, the issue then becomes how soon can I get past this chatbot to the actual people that solve the more complex problems, right? And then the other problem, which is something that I think I will, to a degree, ask every guest about, is how much do the real limitations of the product match up with what an executive looking to employ the product in their company want to use it for, right? Because, again, a lot of the applications are pretty limited. A lot of the ways it can interact are not for the most advanced problems. It doesn't necessarily need to interact with the most advanced problems, right? But if you're dealing with a corporate leadership team that is mostly interested in labor saving as much as possible and cost saving as much as possible, now you have the problem of this technology being applied to so many levels of complexity above its weight, right? So what are some, I mean, as someone who's been working more in the, I guess, medical and psychological field of AI, right? Where do you think the threshold of its limitations kind of are? And where will the human and therapeutic input still need to be?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. You know, I think these things can be really useful tools, you know, and tell that to my students. I write about that in my work. I don't think that they're things that we should be like kind of always resisting or fighting against, but I guess it's how we use them, you know? And I guess the problem is often, you know, under the logics of capital, it's just looking for ways to save money and cut labor all the time. And it's interesting, right? Because, you know, when we met back in the day and I was thinking about AI then, everybody felt like it was going to take away the like banal labor jobs, like the fast food jobs, cleaning jobs, service jobs, like the jobs that are just kind of struggle, you know? And it's very interesting that it's actually replacing the intellectual labor jobs. You know, it's the artists, it's the writers, and, you know, it's the therapists. And there's already so many examples of thresholds being crossed in bad ways, you know? Like there was the recent case from I think March of this year where this man in Belgium was interacting with like a chat GPT kind of, it wasn't chat GPT in particular, but like a language model bot.
Yeah.
And it drove him, so the stories say, you know, to suicidality essentially, like because of the relationship with the bot, you know? So I think that like it can't be a replacement obviously for some sort of like therapeutic interaction, you know? And in some ways it's almost like medically and socially irresponsible to treat it as such, you know, but it's cheap.